Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for Eve Echoes. Today's video is a little bit different. We're going to be sitting down and having some real talk. And forgive me, the stuff in the background here is going to be me doing an anomaly in the Typhoon 2, which I know isn't the most exciting thing to have on in the background, but it's a damn sight more exciting than a video of me mining, which would have been more topical, I suppose. But anyway, the point is the background stuff doesn't matter. Treat this like a podcast. I'm just going to be here spitting some thoughts at you, and I would love dearly to know your feedback and your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoy this, if you agree with it, heck, even if you disagree with it, please help me out, slap the like button, hit subscribe, ding all notifications on that bell, and do of course head over to Redbubble and Patreon if you want to support the channel an extra way there. Anyway, today we're going to be doing some real talk and talking about how I believe we could fix industry. Now, I'm not going to say the industry is completely broken, but it's definitely not in the state of play that it really should be, where it ought to be. A lot of players really enjoy the industrial side of things, and it can be very difficult, especially for new players to get into. So, what I want to do today is go over my thoughts and opinions on four main topics. We're going to start with the worst of them all, insurance. We're going to move through mining, shipbuilding, and then talk about C, B, and A, and X-type modules, the Deadspace modules, right at the end of this one. They do all kind of tie into each other except for the Deadspace modules, and those are their own unique thing at the end. But anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself. First of all, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Insurance. Now, the first thing we need to understand about insurance is the design intent. Why was insurance even added to the game in the first place? And I know a lot of industrialists have been asking themselves that question since it launched, and basically answering with, I think NetEase hates us. And that's not true. That simply is not true. It's just, I feel that ultimately there's a few careless or short-sighted, at least, decisions that have just really upset things. Anyway, the design intent for insurance is to allow players to recuperate their losses and get back into playing the game quickly. If you lose a ship, you can just ping it back with insurance and then keep going with whatever it was you were doing. Yes, okay, PvP does kind of have a lock behind it, and that's more of a safety feature to make sure that you don't all just jump a gate camp, let your fleet be destroyed, then jump straight a couple of systems over to an NPC station and then bring it all back with insurance instantly. Yeah, there's a reason these things exist, ultimately. But the main purpose is to get players back into the game quickly if they lose a ship, specifically through PvE. Anyway, so currently, this aspect of insurance works perfectly. If you are playing the game and you lose a ship in PvE, you can bring it back with insurance and you can instantly jump right back into whatever it was you were doing. So that's working perfectly. As long as you've got either a few spare modules lying around or you can loot your own wreckage, you are literally back in the game from the second that you dock up, essentially. Now, the issue, as I've said, is the damage that this has caused to industry through careless or at least short-sighted decision-making. Now, the first things first here, I get a lot of people saying, oh, we'll just fix it so it's ISK. There's a reason why it will never be ISK, and there's a reason why it shouldn't be anyway. First of all, again, that design intent of insurance, the idea to get back into the game quickly, recuperating your losses, and just getting on with playing. Ultimately, if you understand that, then ISK doesn't fulfill this, as you'd still need to find a shipbuilder, you'd need to wait for them to build it, you need to collect it, deliver it, fly it to wherever you need it, kind of thing. It's a long process. That does not help, and thus the whole thing of, oh, insurance should just pay out ISK, it's never going to happen. Least of all because CCP Games themselves have said it was the worst thing they ever did in EVE Online. It is heavily exploitable. Most importantly though, it just simply doesn't fulfill the design intent of insurance. It's never going to happen. Please stop asking for it. The thing is though, it doesn't need to happen. You can fix insurance without changing that. Ultimately, currently buy orders are too cheap. They don't properly represent ship costs, or rather more, perhaps they represent the ship costs too accurately. The bottom line is, there is no profit on a buy order. If you go to look at a buy order, there's just no reason to actually fulfill it. These buy orders sit there unfulfilled, which leaves other players to say, oh, the whole point is that it's magicking ships up out of thin air, creating buy orders to replace the magicked up ones, And that's therefore harming industry. The fact that it's magicked up the ship is not a problem. That is part of the design intent of insurance, and if you had to wait to get your ship back, you kind of, you undermine the purpose of having insurance in the first place. The simple point is that people aren't fulfilling those buy orders because they simply are not worth it. If you were to increase the buy order cost, suddenly you fix most of the glaring issues with insurance. It's simply right now that if you look at a buy order for a ship and then you actually look at the costs required to build and transport that ship, there's no profit to be made. So people aren't doing it because why would you? Now, the second problem with this is the concept of a one-to-one buy order to ship destruction generation. This is, again, never really going to happen. The reason it is currently the way it is because it costs approximately 30% of the value for the ship to insure it, and then the buy orders generate at approximately a 30% generation rate. This keeps those in line. You need those ratios to be the same, those percentages to be the same. Otherwise, you are basically, again, opening up a heavily exploitable system where, you insure a ship for dirt cheap, you blow it up, you then bring it back and fulfill the buy orders, and then use the buy order money to insure it again, and you just keep doing that over and over again. You can print ISK. It's a problem. That's why that's never going to happen. The biggest issue with buy orders, though, is I can hear people in the background already saying, but hang on, Benzie, they're not generating a 30% rate. They're generating at less than that. And yes, NetEase themselves have admitted this was due to an error with the game treating Plex insurance points and event insurance points differently. Basically, if you had Plex insurance points did the 30% chance, whereas insurance points earned through events like your daily login rewards and that were considerably lower. And I kind of get the thinking here that you've not really paid for anything, but then it's not really a login reward, is it, if it doesn't count as anything of actual value? I think ultimately the second part of fixing insurance comes with just ultimately changing that discrepancy, making it so the game does not differentiate between event insurance points, whether a ship was insured using mainly event insurance points, or whether it's been insured with insurance points bought with Plex. The game needs to not care about those two things and just generate the buy orders at the designated 30% rate. And once it has produced those buy orders, they need to be at a level where you actually make a decent profit off building these. There's no point having a ship cost, say, 30 million to build. Then you've still got to transport it and everything else, and the buy order's only for 29.5 million. That's kind of the situation we've been having, and quite frankly, even if the buy order was 31 million, is that really worth it? Because by the time you've got market transaction taxes, you've still lost money. It needs to have a clear profit on top with those buy orders. Now, we'll be back with more direct shipbuilding fixes later, but first of all, I think we need to move on to talking about mining. Now, before we get into the actual complexities of how to fix mining, first of all, a bit of basic economics. Prices are set by two factors. Either how much people are willing to pay for a product, usually a luxury product, and how cheap the product can be produced, usually for something that is a basic commodity. Ships in Eve Echoes are like luxury yachts or private jets in real life. The price will always be set by how much the richest players are willing to pay. The same goes for things like rare modules. So like when the relic and data analyzers first were added to the game, the fact that these were selling for literally billions of ISK themselves just for a basic module is based on this is how much people are willing to pay. This means that if you have a community of incredibly rich players at the top, they are going to set the prices on how much your top tier modules and top tier ships are costing because they're willing to pay whatever. They've got the money to buy whatever price you set it at. On the other hand, minerals are a commodity, and thus the price is set by who can produce them the cheapest. Now, I personally like to think of this like nails, screws, bricks, that kind of thing. Construction modules do also seem quite a fitting example here, but basically, I'm talking about anything where you need a bajillion of the item. The product that sells is the one that's cheapest by unit, so whoever can make the most ore or mineral in the same period of time as everyone else gets to set the price on it, basically. The cheaper you can manufacture or produce that product, or harvest it in this case, then ultimately you are able to set the prices because you can undercut the competition and still make a profit. The trouble with this is that this means existing mining players are essentially in a race to the bottom in regards to pricing, and new players cannot compete. Basically, think of it this way: a player with a Venture 2 harvests significantly less ore than a player with a Covetor 2 in the same time frame. Therefore, if the prices are going to be set by how much the Covetor 2 can harvest in that time, then the Venture 2 player simply cannot make a profit at the same prices, but equally can't sell higher because there is so much stuff on the market that you'll never clear through the low stuff and actually start selling at a higher price. This makes low-tech mining near impossible. I've been doing this a lot recently on an alt I've recently created, and it is just not possible to cut any form of decent profit. This also has the knock-on effect that any new ships, for example the Porpoise or the Orca, heck, even things like the Rorqual, ion strip miners, new modules like the mining foreman links, all of these would only exacerbate this effect. Top players can harvest even more or faster using those, so the price goes down more and nobody benefits. Well, why is this? Essentially, it comes down to the laws of supply and demand, because some players and alliances have a massive overabundance of supply. Not everyone. People keep making this in the comments and saying, oh, you act like we all have this. No, I don't act like everyone has this oversupply and abundance. I act like a very small group of people have a massive oversupply and abundance, and therefore they are the ones able to set the prices, leaving everyone else unable to effectively compete. This is why so many players want faster mining equipment, better ships, etc. But of course, what they're not realizing is that if they have access to this in order to produce more faster and actually cut a profit in that same time limit, then the big players have access to that same equipment and are going to be cutting even more at that point, pushing the prices down further. Basically, if the small guys can do it, so can the big guys, and the big guys are the ones setting the prices, so again, no one benefits. Now, the way to fix this is to attack on multiple fronts. First of all, remember those Pyroxeres missions, the hand in ore for a certain amount of ISK? Well, this gives a guaranteed income for miners. I reckon they should make more of these, make a lot more of these, make these for pretty much every type of ore out there. Make missions also at the same time while we're at it selectable by type, just like your Concord missions are. Essentially, if you are an industrialist, you can set it to industrial missions and it'll give you ones that are like the hauling and the deliveries and things like that, and the mining and minerals, or you can set it to just combat and therefore go out for the killing missions. That would make life so much easier, actually being able to have a full list of different missions that you can fulfill as either an industrialist or a combat pilot. Now, if you do this, miners can now sell ores for direct, straight-up ISK faucets. This is the equivalent of how ratters have a dedicated and direct income through bounty ticks and through mission rewards. Obviously, yes, the miners still get the mission rewards, obviously, of handing this stuff in, but you're also giving them just a way to mine and then hand it into NPCs and earn a set, flat value, just like, basically, ISK... encounter running does. If you know that you can complete an encounter an hour, and those encounters make you 7 million ISK, you're going to be earning 7 million ISK plus bounties. If you can now suddenly complete 2 of those encounters in an hour, because you've got bigger and better ships with more skills, then you're making 14 million ISK an hour. It increases and scales with the player. Adding these missions does the same for mining. It means new mining players can hand in these ores for a set amount of ISK, and existing mining players who are higher tech level, have better skills, have better access to ships and things like that, are going to be able to harvest more ore for that same price and thus get more of an income, just like ratting. This also sets a low threshold for minerals. If a mission buys a particular mineral for 5 ISK per unit, for example, the market won't go below this because, it'd just have been better to sell it direct to an NPC, which now creates hauling, where miners sell ore cheap to haulers who move it to the market to sell at a profit. In this case, a hauler could buy a load of the particular mineral at 4 ISK. Knowing that the miner now doesn't have to worry about transporting it all the way up to high sec to hand it in, or transporting it to wherever to hand it in. The hauler can then sell it at a profit, knowing that it's just the time and the risk of the journey, etc., that is what ultimately makes that risk reward there. This then stabilizes ore and mineral costs, and once those are stable, we can have events. We can have new ships and modules to speed up the process, as there are now guaranteed baseline prices, which means new players get a smaller amount of that guaranteed price, and fully skilled and fitted players get more of that guaranteed price, just like ratting. Now, the second fix to mining comes with with changes to reprocessing modules. Right now, I would make the argument that reprocessing modules produces entirely too much mineral. There is not even really much of a need to go into the whole reprocessing skills, and if you do, you can make almost as much as you can whilst mining. I'm not saying this shouldn't be something you can do. Definitely, I'd like to see salvage maintain itself as an actual form of playstyle in EVE Echoes. There are plenty more skills and things we need to go into for that, and that's beyond the scope of this particular video. Let me know in the comment section down below if you want me to give my thoughts on salvage in a future video. But basically, I do think that reprocessing currently generates too much mineral. By reducing the amount that reprocessing generates, again, you help miners out. I don't think that ratters should be excluded from this. I think it's a great little side bonus, but when it's cutting into miners' profits and mining is currently on life support, I think we do need to reduce that just a smidge. Now, the third fix to mining comes with changes to shipbuilding, so let's move into that section. Now, beyond the insurance fixes and the changes to mining that I've just talked about, increasing the value of ore, this will also increase the ship cost if left unchanged. Ultimately, if you just increased the amount of how much the minerals cost, you're going to increase the value of any ship that uses that mineral with, you know, because it still needs those. If you need 1,000 of something, and 1,000 particular mineral, and it costs 5 ISK a unit, it's going to cost 5,000 ISK. If it costs 7 ISK per unit, that's now 7,000. Therefore, the cost of the ship increases, and that kind of hurts everybody if it's left unchecked. But this just means we need to rebalance blueprints, especially the Tech 10 ones. The thought process to this is simple, that building ships should consume more in the way of resources, not ISK, as the major input. Ultimately, doing this does also help out the fact that obviously one of the major ISK foresets was hit by the addition of scanning. This has left many sort of more of the high-sec and low-sec player base feeling like they just can't earn enough ISK to stay competitive anymore. I may disagree with that sentiment, but I get where it's coming from. Ultimately, if you made ISK less important and the minerals more important, then suddenly you're adding more meaning to going down that industrial side of things. It means that there are multiple different ways to make money and to actually build ships. And it takes the pressure off the ISK generation a little bit there. Players just feel that they need more ISK than they can currently generate, especially on big projects like, for example, capitals, freighters, and stations, citadels, and capsuleer outposts. All you need to do here is just reduce the ISK cost of ship manufacture or station manufacture, whilst increasing the amount of minerals required to compensate. That's usually I think it's about a 25% reduction of one and a 10% increase of the other is about all it takes to balance this. It's really easy to do. And if you look at blueprints for lower tech ships, they are much more weighted towards the minerals than the ISK cost. Once you hit Tech 10, it is far more about the ISK. The ISK becomes the thing that is blocking your progress to actually building that ship rather than the minerals. And considering an industry is all about that supply chain, ultimately it should be about bringing up the amount of minerals required to do something whilst reducing the ISK cost to compensate so that we don't suddenly have everything just costing more. It's just a rebalance there. Ultimately, this reduces the ISK cost of ship manufacture, increases the amount of materials required. This helps helps miners even more by keeping their ore in demand. This ensures that even with the material-consuming missions, the ones we talked about, where you hand in Pyroxeres or Veldspar or whatever, plenty of those materials still make it to market, offering choice to miners. They can sell it for cheap, in inverted commas, to an NPC and get a guaranteed income, or they can sell it on the market for slightly more, but then they obviously have market forces to contend with. It gives a meaningful choice to miners, it keeps shipbuilding interesting. Ultimately, it helps everything in the industrial process. Finally then, as I said, Deadspace modules. These are the C-type, B-type, A-type, and X-type modules. Now, first of all, a question. Have you ever seen an X-type module actually, fitted to a ship and being used? I'd argue no, you probably haven't. I've seen one myself. And this is because they're insanely expensive for very little advantage. Equally, C-type gear is readily available, and it's often dirt cheap due to it flooding the market. It's so easy to get, and it's, again, massively oversupplied on the market. Supply and demand. Almost nobody bothers with lower tier loot. Why would you fit meta level 5 modules or even meta level 8 modules when the C-types, the meta level 11s, are readily available and only a fraction of the cost more expensive? Basically, this is also why nobody bothers with the lower tier loot, especially since a lot of that is missing. Things like the Dread Gurustus, Shadow Serpentis, that kind of thing. Most of that is missing from the game in any meaningful way. People don't want it, they don't use it, because C-type is right there, it's super easy to get, and it's super cheap. I would suggest, therefore, that we retool Deadspace anomalies, both Nihilus and Overseer, to drop the Meta 7 loot, the Dread Gurustus, the Shadow Serpentis, that kind of thing, with a few rare bits of C-type loot sprinkled in. Basically, you still keep C-type loot dropping in these anomalies, but not much of it. You then have more of the loot that drops there being that meta level 7 type, and then when you go into Scouts and Inquisitors, they are dropping your Republic fleet or your Imperial Navy, that kind of thing. Then you would need to retool the B-type module construction to consume simply C-type modules. That's it. Make it so that a B-type small autocannon requires 10 C-type small autocannons. Then retool A-type module construction to consume B-type modules, and retool X-type module construction to consume A-type modules. If they each required, say, 10 of the previous modules, as I just suggested, then a B-type requires 10 C-types to make. An A-type then requires 100 C-types, and an X-type would require 1,000 C-types. And then, of course, you could reduce this with skills and, Citadel bounties and things like that. This reduces C-type modules from supply, which creates a scarcity, which entices players both to look at lower meta level gear and consider making the C-type through X-type both aspirational and reachable. Now suddenly, you're looking at most people being fitted with Republic Fleet or like Dread Gurustus and stuff like this, with some C-type gear around on their more important ships. And once you have someone who is dedicated into a particular ship, they're going to then use those C-types to upgrade into B-types, and then use the B-types to upgrade into A-types, and then the A-types to upgrade into X-types. And that still makes an X-type something that is massively sort of aspirational. It's a really exciting thing to have, but it's not as ridiculously unreachable as it is currently. Look at how much an X-type module costs. Now decide if you want to have an entire brace of X-type modules along your high slots. The answer is going to be no. No one does that, because we've also got the major risk sink of nanocores, which are another topic for another video. Anyway, those are the 4 topics I wanted to cover here. I wanted to talk about insurance, about mining, about shipbuilding and blueprints, and about the Deadspace type modules. Hopefully this has given you some cool food for thought, given you some ideas. Maybe you've come away from this and gone, actually, that's a really cool idea. If you like these parts, let me know. Hit like on the video, drop a comment down below, and then head to the Eve Echoes official Discord and add it to the suggestion channel directly to the developers, or even directly in-game. There are ways to make suggestions as well there. Do so. Let your voice be heard. Maybe you disagree with my thoughts and opinions. Let me know in the comment section down below. Just keep it polite, otherwise your comment gets deleted. That's how it works. I'm not here to be abused and shouted at and screamed at. I'm all open for a nice casual conversation about how we think this video game should work, but I'm not about to be abused and yelled at over a video game. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions. If you've got other ideas, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.